Thank you, Greg.
Okay.
Thank you. Good morning. Great to see all of you. I love the energy in the room today. We're going to make something happen from here. I can absolutely tell. So I want to do a bit of a thought experiment with everyone here today. I want you to think about something you consider a constant that you imagine is never going to go away. Now I want you, this thought experiment, to go a little bit further. It has to be a fundamental assumption, and if it were to change, everything would change. Now imagine waking up, it could be tomorrow, months from now, to discover that constant went away. It's about your business, it's about yourself. A couple of things that perhaps to spur your thinking. If you were in the taxi business and you thought having a taxi license was a barrier to entry, that's a constant that went away. If you were in the aerospace industry and you thought rockets could never be reused, that's a constant that's gone away. Shipping in the Arctic will never happen. You'll never be able to penetrate the North Pole. Gone away. Renewable energy will never be cheaper than fossil fuel. Gender is assigned at birth. Look, time and again, people have failed to imagine a different world until the moment they realize they're living in one. And then they struggle to find their bearings. Speaking of bearings, even the Earth's magnetic field is changing and may eventually flip, where south is north and north is south. Now, it's not going to happen overnight, but it's clearly not even that's a constant in our world, and that's why I'm here. I'm here today because I believe we need more people in our organizations who are ready to deal with the constancy of change. To do this, you have to imagine a new future that others can't see, and then you have to take action to make it happen. I'm here because I made change my job. Over a 30-year career that went through multiple industries in one of the biggest companies on earth, I learned that I had to be more ready for change. Now I believe change is part of everyone's job. It's part of your job. You cannot delegate it. Here's why. The nature of change is changing. With more intersections and the global dynamics of global humanity and technology, change and the chaos it brings have exponentially more places to emerge now. I call this the Age of Emergent Change. Small, almost indiscernible shifts quickly form broader patterns. They become game changers before you know it, although you can usually figure out where it's going to happen. 50 years ago, well, and it's faster. It's incredibly faster. We're all tired of talking about how fast it is, but let me just sum up the way to think about the pace of change with two key thoughts. One, the world will never be slower than it is right now. I don't know if that scares you, but think about that. And 50 years ago, the expectancy of a Fortune 500 company was around 75 years. Today, it's 15. So if you're starting a business, think about that. It's scary. But what's even scarier is that we're not ready to handle this kind of new emergent change. For generations, we've insisted that our businesses, and the people who make them up, don't forget, it's people who make up businesses, we've insisted that we operate like efficient, fine-tuned machines. And I think what it's done is this machine-mindedness has created an imagination gap in our organizations. I believe that's a really dark place where options and possibilities for the future get stuck, or worse, they die. I believe we need imagination and courage to solve new complex problems in new ways. We can't solve today's problems with yesterday's playbook. But our companies have become risk averse at a time when we need to navigate risk more than ever. We want to already know the answer. We want proof. We want guarantee. We want data, ever more data. How many times are you asked, but show me more data? And don't get me wrong, we need optimization in parts of our company. But as people seek certainty, they become less willing to take risks and try things. They lack incentives to take on necessary risk, and some risk is necessary. We have to shift our mindsets and develop creative problem-solving skills to solve these new problems as new change emerges. As I said, change is what I've devoted my whole career to. For example, imagining a clean tech future in a world that was convinced that fossil fuels were a constant. At GE, we called it eco-imagination, and it ended up generating about $30 million a year in new revenue. At NBC, when we saw the future of streaming video barreling toward us, we took a risk and created Hulu.com. At GE, we also looked at 3D printing and the digitization of industry long before it was clear it was going to be a thing. And here's what happens. At first, these ideas on the horizon, they seem kind of funny. I remember in the days of streaming video, people were laughing, ha ha ha, YouTube, cats playing the piano on video, that's so cute. Energy from the sun, you've got to be kidding, oh, so quaint. And then it gains some traction, but then it becomes impossible. How will we ever make money doing that? We can't give up analog dollars for digital pennies. And then one day, a company called Netflix zooms past the other media companies in market capitalization. Solar costs become cheaper than creating a new gas power plant. The impossible becomes inevitable in the blink of an eye, and if you're caught by surprise, you perhaps can never catch up. So to me, it's about meeting change early, and I've tried to boil it down to a couple of simple thoughts that I want to share with you now. Change happens when you give yourself permission to imagine this future for you, your team, your company, and then you make it happen. My goal today, and in general these days, is to hope inspire and encourage some people to unlock their inner change maker. I wrote a book about it to offer stories and tools to do so successfully. Today I want to share what I have kind of condensed as 3 pillars to what I call imagining it forward. I hope you find a few practical tips out of this. It's about permission, discovery, and making it happen, getting action. Really, it's so simple, but it's not easy. I'm talking about shifts in mindset and behavior change, and that's often the hardest change to make. One of the key reasons our institutions struggle to adapt to change is that they've become resistant to change, especially change from within. We often don't know where to go. So in any organization, you're going to encounter obstacles to closing that imagination gap. And the biggest are what I call gatekeepers. We've all encountered them. Maybe you've even been one. The gatekeepers are the guardians of the status quo, who reflexively say no to anyone who dares to imagine a new way forward. Gatekeepers feel threatened by imaginative thinking and action. They hang on to the way we've always done things. Look, I've worked for my share of naysaying gatekeepers in my career, and I've learned that sometimes you just can't take no for an answer. I've come up with a simple hack. Instead, I hear it differently. When someone tells me no, I decide that means not yet. At GE, I learned often the hard way. It would take me at least 3 times to sell an idea, 3 times to get to Hulu, multiple passes for a clean tech future. But too many times I've been in meetings and been in situations where I see someone who pitches an idea once, they're told no, and you never hear from them again. Look, nobody tells you to keep going. In fact, gatekeepers would prefer if you just went away. You just didn't do it. But if you and your team believe it, you have to find the resiliency. You have to summon it from somewhere to just keep going. And I think the key to this is that you have to give yourself and your teams permission. In fact, I used to actually keep a stack of permission slips. You remember the kind you used to forge your mother's signature in high school to get out of a class. I kept a stack of them on my desk, and I'd give them out to people who expressed concern that they were afraid to try something. I know it's a little goofy, but sometimes these kind of mental hacks really work. So here's my challenge for you. What are you going to give yourself permission to do? What risk are you and your team going to take on? You're going to go back to your office tomorrow. What risk are you going to sign up for? What no are you going to turn into not yet? Here's my point. Stop waiting for someone else's permission to act on your imagination. When you tap into your imagination, you see the future unfold. Visions call you. They're so real, they compel you to act. They give you confidence. They give you an ability to say no to the gatekeepers and to keep going for what matters. Look, I'm an introvert at heart. It may not sound like it, me standing here, but I had to give myself permission to learn how to put ideas out there. to get out in the world and keep going, keep exploring new things. And that brings me to my next point. It's the second pillar and the one I love most, the one I think that is most open to all of us. This idea of following your curiosity, getting out into the world where change is happening and where the future is always revealing itself if you know where to look. Challenge yourself to go out and find something new. Look at what contradicts what you believe, is different, is weird. Especially if something's weird, try to understand it. Better yet, take your friends with you. I used to organize a series of field trips. It took teams I worked with everywhere from breast cancer treatment centers in Saudi, where we uncovered it was a huge issue that wasn't being diagnosed, to military barracks in Israel to understand non-hierarchical leadership, to even judging boy band competitions in South Korea to understand new consumer trends. Change comes from the horizon. Why wait for it to get to you? In business, we have our heads down too closely. Think back 10 years to things that were just on the horizon that have come into the mainstream now. Craft beer, marijuana, organic farming, tattoos. Challenge yourself to think what's out there and may start to scale. Look, once you pick your head up, you're starting to see patterns, connections. I have a simple framework I use called going on threes. First time, I say, wow, that's really interesting. Second time, I declare it's a coincidence. And third time, I ask, is this a trend? What am I going to do to learn more about it? How can I translate it into my company? So how do you make time for this discovery? Well, it's really simple. It's a framework I really like, 70-20-10. It's a way to organize your people, your time, your budget. 70% on what matters now, 20% on the next. The things you can start to already see, you're just not exactly sure how they're gonna scale. And 10%, that's where you focus on what's new. It's about the future we can't yet see. I guarantee you that even the most organized here amongst us is wasting 10% of resources on things you already know. Why not convert it into what you don't know? So that's another challenge to you. Where is your 10% going to take you? What are you going to discover? And finally, the hard part, getting to action. Look, vision doesn't matter unless it's acted on. You have to be the leader who makes things happen. You have to do it. No one's going to give that to you. And I think there's a simple way of thinking about your role. Change is really nothing more than the turning point in a story. It's the strategy you develop, and I think strategy is a story well told. And you have to tell it often. We have a word for people who tell these stories well. We call them visionaries. Thomas Edison in his day needed to prove electricity was safe, so he took 400 men and marched them in downtown New York City with light bulbs on their heads and big, huge electrical cables to prove they wouldn't be killed. Netflix had the name Internetflix, Netflix in its title, even when it was mailing DVDs through the Postal Service. You have to continually edit the story to include new facts and adjust to changing landscapes. And that means you have to be open to criticism and feedback, especially criticism. Look, if everybody thinks your idea is a good one, then maybe you're not asking the right people. You have to invite in people with different perspectives who are going to beat up your ideas. You have to ask different kinds of questions. What's your hypothesis? What problem are we trying to solve? And my favorite, tell me something I don't want to hear. You're empowering teams, you're building trust. Experimentation is another kind of feedback loop where you're seeding new ideas, you're testing them, maybe even testing them with customers. Once you validate it, then you handle it over to the scale team. I love the concept of challenger teams, whose job it is to continually seed and challenge what is. I'm talking about a disciplined approach to inventing the future. It's about creating options. Economists believe options are an economically viable concept. Investors should love it. You're testing more ideas with less money. You're killing what doesn't work. And finally, one last thing, you have to be ready to fail. This is the part where everybody feels uncomfortable because you're not going to like it. No one likes to fail. Fail is the F word of business. Look, I've seeded and backed ideas to the tune of tens, if not hundreds of millions of ideas. We invested in a company that failed before we got to Hulu. We invested in clean technology, 4 different versions of a battery and solar, many that had to be written off. In fact, woes that companies have in clean tech and energy today might be less if they had experimented more. I know that feeling of defeat. But here's the thing. If failure's not an option, then neither is success. And there's a cost. You have to risk something. Risk is the will to act on your imagination, and it's what ends up saving us. You know what? I know what you're thinking. Oh, you know what? It's so much easier for me just to take the path I know. You feel it. You feel fear. You're afraid to take a risk, afraid to try something. But there's courage you have to summon, humility to accept when things don't go well. And let me just end with this thought. The idea that I'm offering here is that we're talking about leading in a new way. It's a new mindset orientation. It's a mission objective. You're no longer a manager thinking you can control things. You really can't. Management as a control function is dead. You're a visionary, leading your team to the future, empowering others to figure their way out. Look, don't let the machines win. Don't let the imagination gap expand. Don't let emergent change get you down. Take some steps, lead the way. It's about using your imagination, creating the future. I believe we absolutely need more people in the world willing to take the risks, imagine the future, and make it happen. My dose of inspiration for this morning, I hope you find this useful. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Greg.